This is so auspicious. So this is my very first restream with and my very first restream with a guest. And boy, there's so much to say. This has been about 3 years in the making. And you and I have been working together for 5 years now. 5 years and some change. Half
Wow.
of a decade. That's so wild.
That is amazing.
I will introduce you in a minute, but something that I would like to share from behind the scenes, because I like synchronicities and magic, and as you know, I have been talking to Anna recently, grandmother
Yes.
of Jesus. And so yesterday when I took a drive to Newport, or was that yesterday or the day before? Anyway, my most recent trip to Newport, I was talking about this moment in time, that it was coming, and I was asking for a blessing.
Excellent.
And right after that, the car right in front of me had the license plate that said 396. And then it said LKJ, which I took to mean live stream with Kevin and Julie. And
Nice.
we can explain to the
Wow.
audience later, but you and I are very much into the numbers of 369 in all their arrangements. And
Absolutely.
and also I myself am a 369. My numerology is 369.
Mm,
So it's a 36, and then you break it down to 9. So I liked that auspicious beginning.
very auspicious. That is great to hear. I love it.
Yeah. So without further ado, um, I would like to introduce you and then invite the audience to get settled in with us to the present moment.
Excellent.
And so, hello, everybody. If you're watching on Creators of New Earth, this is my mentor of the past 5 years. His name is Kevin Snow. He has really helped me come into my own. And he is a big part of the reason you see me on here right now. And yes, he's been a great inspiration and helped instill me with confidence and belief in
Mm,
myself. And I'm so grateful for that.
mm.
And we will be talking about, excuse me, I was looking for my notes. We'll be
Yeah.
talking about who Kevin is and what he does, and also be busting some myths today. So,
Yes.
without further ado, I invite the audience to presence this present moment by taking 3 deep inhales and exhales together, if you feel inclined. This also helps me relax and get centered. And a little blessing for us all. May this conversation be infused with golden light particles that benefit every person who hears this now or in the future. May the energies, frequencies, and vibrations shared here bring deep relaxation and rejuvenation of your being. May you listen, feel, and receive from your heart with ease and grace. So it is.
Tack och well, see. Wow.
Nice. So, I, you know, when we had this idea to do this together, you said, well, think of 3 questions. And that was a little bit challenging for me because, you and I meet about once a month.
Yeah.
And I often make a list of way more than 3 questions to ask you. And so I was like, wow, how can I do that? So I have more than 3 topics, but I think a good place that I'd like to start is, so people on here may not know, but again, this is Kevin Snow, and he's also known as the Desert Shaman. And you can find him at snowwellness.com. And Snow Wellness also has a platform on Spotify. and
Mhm.
I highly recommend it. There are so many great nuggets and
Thank you.
tips and treats on that platform.
Mhm.
So, and if you find that by the end you are inspired to make an appointment or have a conversation with Kevin, again, you can reach him at Snow Wellness with two W's, one for snow and one for wellness, snowwellness.com.
Absolutely.
So, Kevin, one thing I wanted to ask you about and maybe help bust a myth today is um, in the new age world and even in the spiritual world, sometimes
Mhm.
that word shaman gets thrown around really loosely. And I think,
Absolutely.
we live in times where there may be more charlatans on earth than there's ever
Mhm.
been.
Yeah.
And so it's possible that not everybody calling themselves a shaman really is. Um, but you do carry the title of the Desert
I
Shaman.
do.
And
Mhm.
I think another myth that we could bust is that if you're not indigenous or if you're a white girl
Correct.
or a white
Mhm.
guy,
Mhm.
that you can't be a shaman. So can we speak to everything I just said for a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Can you
totally.
speak to it?
Yes. Yes. First of all, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful to be a part of this inaugural journey and journey, right? So we can talk about that too. But here we are, journeying together in this world that is metaphysical, right? We're not in the same room. So we are bits and bytes coming through the screen and talking to people. And so it really is a good way to kind of introduce that concept of shamanism, because shamanism is, or the ability to be a shaman is somebody who can move into a transpersonal state or a state of non ordinary awareness, as it's taught in many of the shamanic traditions, and how the shaman has trained to be able to access other realms of reality. That's your conversation with Anna, right? So, having and then getting feedback. So you got that pretty immediate feedback, which is beautiful. And so this is where we just keep getting these synchronicities that are often happening, um, and we're either noticing them or not. And so, really, the training of shamanism. Oh, so we're losing audio, huh?
Oh, we're losing audio?
Hmm. But
Mm,
keep going. But it might log in and out. And see, we're always just, challenged to do a little clearing
yeah.
and to keep moving along. And so we'll see how that keeps playing out.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep going and the
Okay.
platform will catch up. So,
Let me before we go
yeah,
on, Kevin, let me ask my moderator if she can hear the audio. Is that okay with
yeah,
you?
yeah,
Okay, let
definitely.
me ask her real quick if she can hear it. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We want to make
Yeah.
sure that you can hear us. She may have logged out. Well, let's just assume that everybody can hear us.
We'll just keep moving. Keep moving on. The show must go on.
Oh yeah, there's somebody on
Oh,
Facebook and they say that the sound is okay there. So that's
oh,
good.
excellent. Excellent. All right. And so this is what we're talking about is shamanism, shaman, the identification of shaman. This is it a cultural appropriation? Is it essentially, is it something that you can learn to do? Is it something you have to be born into? So, I think there are interesting concepts, different ways of viewing this in many different areas. So here I am, white guy. I do have a lineage. I do have some Native American in my lineage. And the way that I look at lineage is also this past life lineage and a genetic lineage. And so that they tend to cross over. And so we cross into our own genetic lineage and then come back out in gathering up diversity essentially into other genetic lineages and then bringing that back into our own. And so we can definitely expand upon that. But the idea is that you're usually told. So when I had this car accident, and we can visit that in a moment. But this kind of change of life, so that I went from being this particular person to this particular person, and it took a while to make that transition. But I was told along the way, "Do you know who you are?" And I didn't. And so, and that happens to a lot of people, and I think our listeners, can identify with that, where we can get feedback like, I have gifts or I have something going on that I don't totally understand.
Mhm.
And so that was definitely happening with me. And so this, even the Desert Shaman, as a name of a business, that was the business that I started 20 years ago. And that was given. So that was, presented to me as, well, you're the Desert Shaman. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, maybe. So
Yeah.
we'll
Was
see
that
how
Robin
that
Benson of
it
Santa Fe
was,
School?
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
So she's the one that introduced that, and then introduced me to that, and then we put it on business cards, and basically here we are today. And so basically it is always given, and that's how I trusted that as well.
Yeah.
So, knowing that if we give this to ourselves, then we should do this in a way of understanding that we have this ability to move into non-ordinary reality and
Mhm.
to be helpful to those who are coming to us, or
Mhm.
to those that we're to share these messages with.
Mhm.
And that understanding basically goes with the training of shamanism, which is, there's three components of shamanism itself, which is divination, extraction, and soul retrieval. So learning basically how to do those three things, and then being able to present that to those who are coming to you for help.
Mhm.
And that's what we do here. And so, this is basically me as, should you identify yourself as a shaman? I'm still kind of back and forth on that, actually. I do think that it draws a lot of negative attention as well as positive. And so kind of staying under wraps a little bit is not a bad idea. But
Mhm.
here I am, sharing myself out into the world and saying that I believe that I've developmentally built a container that can hold that
Mhm.
truth. And so that's essentially what we're talking about here is, that this shamanism as a way of working with other humans is using intention as the medicine.
Yeah.
And so being able to learn how to do that.
Yeah. And if I could interject, so I think a huge component of shamanism too is, it's not this new age thing where you're hanging out
Mhm.
in some other realm. It involves
Right.
alchemy, right? We're bringing the realms
Definitely.
together,
Absolutely. Yes.
right? As a means
Mhm.
of helping somebody, right?
Absolutely. It's really
And
important to
the
live
other
here
thing,
in our
sorry,
physical
go ahead.
reality. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to live here in our physical reality, and to be able to have an effective, happy, joyful life in this physical reality is developmental. It is an ability to develop into this. And so, yes, so I do believe that, just going into the non ordinary realms, and even for no reason, so you have to have purpose to do this. And so
Yeah.
traveling into those realms to bring back the information to help.
Mhm. The other thing too, I think, it's like before we had religion per se or
Mm.
churches per se, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
know, there's this sort of not sort of, but there is a myth that somehow, you know, white people aren't indigenous. Well, we're all
right.
indigenous to somewhere, right? And
Exactly. Yeah,
if we're European, it might be to, we might have been druids, or we could have
right.
been many things, but we too had our
Yeah.
indigenous practice that overlapped with many
Mhm.
practices from all over the world. And you see that, in ley lines and sacred sites and temples
Yes.
that predated the church, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to bust that myth too.
That's an excellent point. It really is that we're all from somewhere, and really that somewhere. And I talk a lot about this in the work that I do, that we can trace our lineages back. So, this grouping of, the Americas, and how we are living now in this world, and how this can trace all the way back to a Lemurian and Atlantean culture that is many thousand years old,
Mhm.
that predates all of this that we're experiencing. But really, we are from that lineage, and then that actually moves off this particular planet into
Mhm.
Pleiades and other star
Yep.
systems. So I do believe that, we'll check into that as well. But just understanding that these lineages basically have much more context than just the last 100 years.
And we've played, I mean, many people who are watching this, we've played um in those realms and times. We've been in Lemuria, we've been in
Oh,
Atlantis, we've been in ancient Egypt, we've been in
wow.
ancient Tibet, we've
Yeah.
been, Arcturians and Palladians and all the,
Mhm. Yeah.
and there isn't even really, and that's what we're really starting to embody, is that it's when we say we were, past, present, and future are happening
Yes.
simultaneously.
Mhm.
There's another myth that I'd like to bust today. I hear a lot in New Age, and hello, Delia. Thank you for dropping in. Love you, girl.
Mhm.
Um, so, um, I hear in certain spiritual circles and certain New Age circles that, oh, now is not the time for a teacher. You're your own teacher. Now is not the time
Mhm.
for a guru. And I'm not saying that that's a portion of that, might not be true. I mean, we're finding so many charlatans all over the world. And
Mhm.
how many quote unquote gurus have we now come across that it's like we realized that there was, you know, sexual abuse going
Yeah.
on, or
Yeah.
abuse of
Mhm.
children,
Yeah.
or just a total turning of the upside down of sacred teachings, and all sorts of mayhem happening, right?
Yes.
So, and ultimately we are our own teacher, but I believe it was my spirit who was drawn to you and took you on, because I was
Yeah.
aware that you already embodied some things that I wished
Mhm.
to embody, and
Yes.
that you had been down some paths that I hadn't, and that you had wisdom that would be helpful to me. And we've never talked about this in a
Mhm.
ever really, but I know in certain traditions, especially in Tibetan traditions, there is this cycle of the teacher was the
Right.
teacher in the last
Mhm.
life, and now he's the student, and it's this constant like
Mhm.
following of each other that way. And
Yeah.
you and I have also talked about, whoever it is you're communicating with, whether it's Ganesha, or whether it's Mary Magdalene, or whether it's Buddha, or whoever, these ascended masters, they don't wish us to bow to them. They
Right.
wish for us to see ourselves as their equal, where we're not putting them, yes, we can honor them and give them reverence and all of these things, but the whole point, if we're on this path to ascended mastery, is to
Mhm.
realize ourselves as an equal to them, right?
Yes.
Not with a lot of
Absolutely.
ego and pomp and circumstance.
Right.
But so this whole, there's a very modern reframe, and I think within that reframe sometimes things get warped. Like for instance, the idea that, now is not the time for teachers. I
Mhm.
personally don't agree with that. When I'm ready, um not to have you as a spiritual friend, which will probably be like never, but
Mhm.
when I feel that, okay, I don't really feel the need to have monthly guidance at this time,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
I'd like to step into a different role now and maybe help
Mhm.
other people in the way that you've helped me, or whatnot.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that
Definitely.
our connection ends. But what do you have to say about how can we bust this myth together?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that everything you've said is absolutely on track. And this has been my experience of I had physical teachers up until a point, and then I got a very clear message from Yeshua that so Jesus in the Christian tradition that no more physical teachers, just me. And then I was left with, all right, I better get better at doing this interchange with the metaphysical world so that I can have a consistent way of receiving this information. That's where I took on using a pendulum actually, and learning how to use the pendulum and learning how to do the clearings and things. Lots necessary to be able to use intuitive tools like that. And so this idea of letting go of teacher is a developmental milestone. Basically, it's like you get to a certain place, and then like you mentioned, there are teachers that fall away, there are teachers that fall victim basically to, I call them tests. So whatever the test is, here is presented the test, and many of the readings and teachings that we have speak of those tests. So here's a way that you can pass this test by being in integrity and being, in integrity with the work, and pass through that particular test of, being presented in these different ways. So sexuality, money, right? All these different things that we can be attached to. And so, can we have the test presented to us, and we have the teaching and the development that we can move through that test onto the next? So I do see it as levels, and I definitely see it as developmental. So my psychology training has a bent towards developmental in psychology as well, and putting it in the transpersonal realm. And
Mhm.
so that is what we're saying here, is that the training is imperative. And I always tell the people that I'm working with, I just need to stay a couple steps ahead. So as long as I'm a few steps ahead, then I've experienced the thing or learned the lesson, and either failed the test or passed it. And so at that point, I can meet people in that way and say, when they're coming to me with distress or even joy, and I can say, yes, I understand. And I can be with and create a container for that. That is really, really important. So it's
Mhm.
critical to this work to be able to hold space. You have to have had the experience.
Compassion is a
Mm,
very
yes,
big deal in the physical realm, right? We think of it as this
definitely.
spiritual concept, compassion, but
Hmm. Yeah,
that's where
yeah,
both realms meet. And as far as you gave me a great segue, but I just want to back up here for a
yeah.
second. Uh, as far as like learning how to communicate with a teacher in the other
Mm,
dimension, yeah,
yeah.
I'm starting with license plates.
I love that.
I
It's a
mean,
great way to do it.
I hear
Yeah.
Anna, I can hear a sentence or two, but it's not like oh, Claire Hartsong, who wrote
Mm,
the book about Anna's life story, and they communicated for
mm,
30 years before she published that
wow,
book. Yeah,
that's cool.
I'm not there, but license plates and a few sentences is
Mm.
where I'm at.
It's
Listen,
powerful.
you gave me a great segue. So you Well, let's see how we're going to rearrange this. First of
Yeah.
all, your mom had a lot of healing abilities, and
Mm,
she
yes.
was one of your first inspirations, if
Hmm.
I remember correctly. Um,
Absolutely.
and you had a lot of skills and abilities without having to have formal training or, a piece of paper or certificate, but
Hmm.
you purposefully chose to go to Naropa. Can you share with the
Yeah.
audience why you chose that path
Yeah.
and who you were meaning to help by doing that, and and what it did for you and how it benefits people who choose to work with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. This is the bringing together of the training that I had. So Native American shamanism, and that's in the Dene and Lakota discerning tribes. Those two fit together because of the Tibetan lineage. And Lakota really is the most open and sharing of their tradition, which is really helpful. And so that's where I was received in as, yes, we recognize you, and here are the teachings. And so basically this is what um, came to me through this process of, as a young child. I tell story of people that I had this imaginary friend, and my mom recognized, that Kevin has this imaginary friend. And so and in looking back on it, when I had some more knowledge, that imaginary friend basically was a ghost that I lived in the house that we lived in as a child. And and so I looked back and thought, yeah, so I had this ability. There was also a lot of negative energy in that house. And so just kind of working forward, I was exposed to my mother and my aunt actually followed a lot of this training as well, and Native American training, and was very, very um, a high level teacher and in her lifetime as well. And so she would come by, and I hurt my ankle one time, and she said, well, I can do Reiki on that. I didn't know what Reiki was, but it worked. It's like, well, this is great. So I eventually found out 20 years later what Reiki was and learned how to do it. But in this way I was led towards Naropa. And really began to notice that Tibetan lineage was very powerful with me. And one of the guides that I was seeing, I called Old Tibetan Guy. It was just really this kind
I
of
like
face,
that story. Yeah.
right? So, it was just kind of coming to me in meditation. And, sometimes you close your eyes, you see shapes, faces, that kind of stuff, but it was pretty clear. And, so it was really like there's a connection here. And then learning to meditate, I wanted to learn to meditate, and I kept finding my way back into that Shambhala tradition that is the foundation of Naropa. And so for many years, probably 25, maybe even 30 years, this was my goal to go to Naropa. In 2017, I finally did get a master's degree and in counseling at Naropa, and purposely to balance the shamanic work. So I've been working as a shaman for many years, and I wanted to bring the psychological tradition of transpersonal psychology in to this work that I was doing so that I could really sit with and have the languaging. And really, in the 2.5 years that I was in that program, the main learning of any counseling program should be unconditional positive regard. That if you can sit with somebody in that unconditional positive regard, that they will heal, they will find their way to the healing. And then I have this shamanic background to know that they're getting a ton of help as well. So from the metaphysical world. And so bringing these worlds together basically was really important to me. And that's what this business is now that I do.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
have another question that will draw
Yeah.
out a little bit of an addition to that. So,
Yeah.
um, you, so the DNA lineage, people from the DNA, sorry, I almost said DNA, the DNA lineage
Hmm.
and the Lakota lineage,
Hmm.
they gave you gifts and teachings, and you
Yes.
wanted to give back, but you
Yes.
couldn't give back without this degree. Can you
Yeah, definitely.
expound a little
Pe-
further, please?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So it was, I had a lot of people say to me, even in the shamanic work, right? This is a functioning, it's a life purpose, it's a work. You can do this in the world. This was, there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. And I just kept getting the calling through clients, through other people, through these traditions, that this is the next step to bring this kind of Western psychological model into this world of shamanism, to give it measurement. And so this idea of measurement was really important to me, and in the scientific model it's very important. And I'm using a pendulum basically to create that measurement structure so that we can really step in and understand through the education neurotransmitters, these things that we can physically read and say, wow, there's a lot of serotonin here but not a lot of oxytocin. And so this is again this way of measuring, assessing, to be able to assess. And so that gave me this knowledge base. And then the knowledge base of the transpersonal work is invaluable. That we are pre-personal beings, that we are in this personality that we currently live in, and that we are transpersonal, that we can transcend this personality into a connection to source, spirit, and our soul.
Oh, I just love you.
Mm,
You're such a perfect blend of practical and otherworldly.
mm,
It's I've been tracking the questions that I wanted to ask you and what you're
mm.
saying as we move along, and
Yeah.
you naturally, without knowing it, have led me to the segue to my next question, and everything we've talked
Oh,
about. It's so harmonious. I love it. Um,
excellent.
so I there's a couple things here now. Um, okay, so um, I would like to dispel the myth. You and I had a conversation one time about the highest frequency, but we won't
Mm,
go here just yet. I just want
okay.
to throw out a little tidbit. So,
Perfect.
lots of times people are like, oh, you see these memes all over the internet. It's just plastered with like, vibrate higher, or,
Yes.
raise your frequency or whatever. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you taught me
Mhm.
something really important about that. It's not necessarily about vibrating at like a certain high frequency. It's about vibrating at a frequency that is appropriate for you at
Yeah.
this point in your evolution. Okay. But we're going to hold on to that for a juicy little
Excellent.
nugget for the audience to be wanting more. Like, stick around and we'll revisit
Excellent.
that. Because you mentioned before that, your abilities, that is something that I wanted to share with the audience about you, and also something that I don't know how to do yet, but I would like to learn how to do
Mm,
this. So one thing that you know how to do is we can check in on any given day and you can say, okay, these chakras are out of alignment,
mhm.
including you're ahead of this chakra or you're behind this chakra,
Oh, yeah.
as well
Mhm.
as giving me a method to step into the center of the chakra, right? And
Absolutely.
I think there was some information, and you can expound if you like, about
Mhm.
that if you are ahead of yourself, it's a way of being detached. And if you're
Yes.
behind yourself, there's some sort of codependency going on. I thought that
Mhm.
was rich. But before
Yeah.
we go there, so not only can you do what we just said with the chakras, you are able to say, okay, your serotonin is low, or your cortisol's high, or your like
Mm,
all
yeah.
of the hormones and the body chemistry. You can do that as well. And as well, you can say, hey, over the past month or since we've met last, you know, the lowest frequency that you've held is this, the highest frequency you've held is
Mm,
this, and you've been hanging out in an average of around this. So, can we speak to those abilities and how you learned to do that,
yeah.
including the organs? Like, if my kidneys want some attention, or my heart,
Mhm.
or my lungs, or whatever, and you always have something, whether it's an essential oil, a breathing exercise, what have you.
Yeah.
You always give me things to do that I can do for myself to get myself back on track. So maybe we can review that, and then we can head in the direction of this thing that we were talking about when it comes to frequency.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's great because it really is the practicality of the work. What came through when I began to work with Yeshua was this measuring idea and using the pendulum basically to do that. So I use tarot cards, animal totem cards. I have a plethora of angel cards, right? So different cards, intuitive tools basically that I can use to tune in and ask questions, discern the answers, because all of these things have a discerning process as well. And so then I created this charting kind of early on for myself because I asked this question really early on, like, what do I need to work on? And we always have this kind of perception of self, and I've done quite a bit of work, and so at the point where I entered into really being this person in the world and doing this work, I wanted to be able to measure these things for myself and say, I really feel confident that, and my second chakra was really not doing great. And it really matched up to relationships and challenges that I had in relationships and issues with money and creativity and bringing to the world basically what I was working on. And so looking at the second chakra and saying, yeah, there's definitely something up there. And then asking the questions, just really consistently sitting down, doing these self sessions for myself and asking questions and making notes and making a chart, developed this charting process that we're talking about where I can kind of track with you over the months. And so people will come in, we'll do an initial session. I'll kind of share a lot of the stuff that we're sharing today and give you the cosmology and the basics of the work, and then give them a basic understanding of here's where you set up on your chakra system. And all of this is based on a neutral. So that is a positive, negative, neutral structure. And I do believe that science is set up that way as a positive, negative, neutral. I point to the wall outlet and I essentially say that, this work that we're doing is that energy coming through the wall. It has a hot lead that creates a polarity and a ground that is really just a piece of metal stuck in the earth that makes it actually work. And so that's the neutral. So we always have a neutral heart chakra, and then we have three chakras above and three chakras below. And so technically, this heart isn't a chakra. It is actually the connector of the chakras that we do have, three above, three below, as above. so below. So there's a lot of context to kind of fill in that. But this is the essence of the work. And then to be able to say each chakra has a development. So it can develop in the positive and negative. And that's how we develop. So that's why the bias to the high frequency, which would be positive, is not necessarily the goal, because that's how we develop. Is we develop from a center point into this lifetime, and we develop in this way of a circle. So we're developing into the dark and into the light at the same time. And what that does is it gives us more of a Taoist or a Vedic principle of there's no bad to dark and there is no good to light. There's only positive, negative, and neutral. And neutral, in my assessment, is love. That's the word I use, even though that's a very used word as far as amorous or attraction or relationship. We use it in the way of describing this neutral platform or the non dual. That duality gets to come from. And so there's a lot of context there, but basically that's the structure of the work. And then from that, we can ask all kinds of questions so that we really can tune into your guides. So we can tune in and say, Anna, in this angelic realm of the third eye and in the tradition of the paraffin angels, and say, Anna has a message for you. And then we can ask Anna, are you going to answer these questions about health? And typically in this work, it is questions about health, questions about relationship, questions about work. So these life areas that we are all working on. And so that's why, in this work, your deepest questions, bring them and we will get them answered. So me, no, but guides, yes. And so it'll come through basically in the way that you need it, matching your developmental markers. So matching your frequency. So someone can come in at the scale of the frequency that I use is minus 3,300 plus 3,300. It is like muscle testing. So it is like kinesiology in that way, using a pendulum. And so that's what we're doing. And we're creating a positive and negative scale. And then we're essentially saying, this is where you fall on the scale today. It's very dynamic, and it is also developmental. And then what we were talking before as we lead into that is that that scale moves. And so we'll share more about that. But we can literally say, we can ask that question when we start and say, where's the focus for this session? Physical. And if it's physical, then I'm going to be looking at systems. So I'm going to be looking at digestion, metabolism, these different systems, and what are our readings. And again, it's always a positive and negative read. And we want basically to come into balance in all of those areas. So the first question we ask usually is, what are your elements? Earth, water, air, fire. And how are they balanced? Are they in the negative expression or the positive? And how can we bring them back to the center? And so these are all questions that you can bring into a session and really begin to get a clear picture of who you are being in the world.
Mm-hmm. God, this is so fun. I'm having
It
so much
is.
fun.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, can we, or can you please, will you please expound a little bit on why it's not all about like
Mm-hmm.
being at some really high frequency, why it's more important to be at the frequency that matches where you are in your evolution at any given point
Totally.
in time?
Yeah, it's really important because this is where I'll start with people, because that is a metaphysical new age concept of the higher the frequency, the better. And so, and what we're doing by choosing that bias is we're essentially saying positive polarity better. And so it is matching basically religious training, school training, higher the grade, the better, higher that, right? So all of these trainings that we have as humans match that philosophy. And all of the trainings of these ancient teachings are about finding a center point. And so it really does fit into the teachings of Jesus and his way of saying it's all about the heart. Just keep coming into the heart, keep coming into compassion, keep coming into that neutral presence, that place that is non dual. And so, in the platform in the Vedic system, non dual equals duality, that we don't get to live in this duality unless we are accepting that there is a non dual platform for it. And so that's what we're doing here is we're acknowledging the center point. So it's not about just growing into the positive. It's about learning and growing and finding a center. And what that center does is then it moves. And then you develop more and it moves again. So that we get a frequency of like plus 140. I have a lot of clients that start like minus 600, minus 800, and then we move them into these positive numbers, but we're always moving that center point. So when the center is plus 1,000, plus 2,000, plus, right? So now that is a higher center point. So it is not necessarily a higher frequency because there is light and sound that make up these chakras. So it's another important element of understanding what a chakra is. It is vibration, which is sound, and frequency, which is light. And so when I give a simple explanation of light, and there's a heavy bias towards being in the light and not being in the shadow or in the dark, and then step out. I grew up in Scottsdale and Phoenix area. So step out midday in the middle of summer into the light and stay there for a while.
See how you like.
Right? So you won't have that bias at that point anymore. You'll be looking for some shade and looking for some shadow basically to hide out in. And that essentially is what we do as humans as well, is that we balance these things so that we can find our center point consistently. And so it's just a really important concept as a foundation of work in general, that we're not seeking something higher. We're seeking something more, and we're seeking a better level of development as humans so that I can understand my shadow and I can apply that, like you're saying, in the codependence. You'll hear me, in a session with me, you'll hear me say that word more than a few times, codependence. So it's where I started my journey. It's definitely a really important understanding of stages of development from dependent to codependent to independent to interdependent. And so these are all structures that we use in this work. And the codependence is attachment, fear. And that's what the negative realm will provide. It will provide complete attachment. And fear basically leads that direction. And the positive creates complete detachment. And so a lot of times this Eastern philosophy of detachment comes into play as, yes, that's the benefit. But then in psychology, you look at detachment, and that's basically being dissociated. But I'm not here, just checked out. And so here I am at this really high frequency, just completely dissociated from the struggle of humans and even myself sometimes. And so that's why it's not good to really seek out a higher frequency and to detach or dissociate basically from this developmental structure.
This is okay, so Todd Medina, he has a platform called Sology, and he was one of my, I've been wanting to do this for about 3 years, and I found Todd about 2 years ago. But anyway, he was one of my inspirations for this. But Todd, he's so awesome, but he's also very humble. And he says that he never watches, and I can understand, because he's done what we're doing right now like 6,000 times. And he says he just doesn't watch them again. But I'm telling you, I'm going to rewatch this one, not to myself, but to hear what you had to say, because even as for long as I've been studying with you, I'm like, oh my God, this session is just jam packed.
Yes, it is. I will too, as well, because I always like to kind of get that reflection back. And, any input, listeners, send me an email. You've come across something that I've said that doesn't make sense, you just let me know. And we'll clarify it for you.
Awesome. Oh, my childhood friend, I've known her since, I don't know, since we were like 8 or something. She says, this is so interesting, but now I'm feeling so confused.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a process of clarity, gaining
it totally
clarity.
Is.
You just like
yes.
wade through the mucky muck and clarity comes.
Yeah.
There was something, so you always give me these beautiful segues. We were talking about light and shadow. Now, since we seem to be on the tip of busting myths today, another myth I'd like to bust. So, do you know Lisa Renee's work? Does that
I
name
don't believe so.
familiar? Anyway, so I know there's lots of camps. I don't want to make it so polarity, duality when it comes to angels, but some people are all about angels, and some people are like, no way, that's just like some
totally.
trap or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, but what I learned within the past year that I didn't know, and I would like if you would be willing to share. Um, so when you and I first started working together, you noticed that I had a pretty well developed third eye,
Hmm.
but also the shadow could get in the way sometimes.
Hmm.
And so we've worked with that in many ways. One thing that you had me do that I still do every day is to put goldenrod essential oil here. And I
Excellent. Good.
also am aware that, there's not just this third eye. I kind of see, like, you see how I have two eyes this way? I also have two eyes this way. So I
Yes.
think of a third
Mhm.
eye here and a third eye here.
Perfect.
And so anyway, I put the goldenrod here. But so you introduced to me that, okay, so uh Una, who is the shadow that was, you know,
Hmm.
messing with me, and I used to get really kind of scared of her and kind of
Yeah.
really frustrated with her, and then I realized, no, she's my teacher too,
Yeah.
right? Because we're talking
Absolutely.
about
Yes.
holding the light and the shadow equally and
Correct.
not doing this polarity of extremes, like one is good or one is bad. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
she's a teacher, like she's a pretty potent teacher, and she
Yes.
can really mess with you sometimes, but if you're willing to stop being afraid of her and just
Yes.
listen to what she's teaching you, she's very potent. But in any case, her so she would be the shadow side of Uriel,
Yes. Hmm.
right? Can you speak to that a little bit? And to
Yeah. Hmm.
angels in general, for people who are like, oh, I think they're
Yeah.
bad, or I think they're good, or, like,
Totally.
let's clear off the new age dust from the angels, and
Yes.
let's pick them up out of the bucket where they have just been discarded.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important because we have these chakras like we talked about. We have these energy centers basically, and I perceive them to be universes, right? So this metaphysical world or not physical world is equally as complex as this one that we're living in, this physical world. So there's at least 8 or so billion entities that exist in this metaphysical world that balances out our physical world. So we kind of just hone it down into I talk about an archangel or I talk about a seraphim or a cherubim or something like that, these different categories of angels. And what I did is I just, with the pendulum and with the guidance, starting basically at a center point of this is my teacher, Yeshua. What about angels? Do they exist? Yes. And so, working with that energy and then saying, okay, looking at what I'm reading, Doreen Virtue was very, virtuous and prolific in the world of talking about angels, all the different names of angels. And so what I did is I just categorized them and said, angels exist in my second chakra and in my sixth chakra. And so those are the angelic beings. Those are the realms basically where angels exist. And so from that standpoint, that gives me a universe. So a second chakra universe of relationship, physical health equals the physical body. Our second chakra is our physical body. And our sixth chakra, which is essentially our subtle body. So in the Vedic tradition, specifically named subtle body, like you were calling it, third eye. This is basically connected to our pituitary. Each one of these chakras is connected to an endocrine gland. And that's how we can see chakras basically making sense. So, what do they mean? Energy comes from these realms into this transformer of energy and equals chemistry in my physical body, which would be the endocrine system that's connected to that chakra. And so, that pituitary, like we're talking about with you, is there's 6 or 8 different hormones that basically come from this pituitary, and it's not a huge conversation in the medical community, and right how instrumental that endocrine gland is to the rest of this functioning body of my endocrine system. And the pineal, which is actually the eye, and has a photoreceptor on it, and that photoreceptor actually faces up. So it is getting light from above, so
So you're
starlight basically.
associating the pineal not with the
Hmm.
third eye,
Yes,
but with the crown chakra,
exactly.
and the
Hmm. Yeah.
pituitary with the
Hmm.
sixth chakra, the third
Exactly.
eye.
Yeah. And that's basically what we're talking about. There is two. It is the pineal and the pituitary that work together, bringing energy in, And there's this other concept of energy coming from the root. So we actually are a toroidal field. We are a field of energy coming in through the crown and in through the root, both into the heart.
Yeah.
And so that story is really important. And then these angels basically existing in your second chakra and your sixth chakra, which are connected through your heart. So that's how these realms of angels are connected. So it's the lower realm of angels, not bad or, not as developed, just our second chakra. And how archangels, legion angels, guardian angels exist predominantly in these realms of the second chakra. Raphael, and all of these characters that we know as archangels, basically helpers. And that's where I find when I work with somebody, you're working with Raphael. That means there's something going on with your physical body or in a relationship. And we need to figure that out and right the relationship and right the physical body back into balance. And third eye is upper angels, seraphim, paraphim, cherubim. Those are the three realms of angels that are existing in that third eye. And these are higher angels, Gabriel being one of the main characters that exists in that cherubim realm. And a lot of people say cherubim, and I really don't know which one is right. I say theme because the other two are basically themes. So cherubim and paraphim.
And there was a being that recently gave you, okay, so when Anna started communicating with me,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah,
and then just let's hold this question in our mind.
yeah.
Angie, we're gonna get to you, I promise.
Mm.
Angie says, what about angel numbers? Like when we look up numbers, there
Ah,
are angel
yeah.
numbers, right? Okay, so we'll come back to that, Angie. Thank you.
Yeah.
But when Anna started talking with me, um, you said, okay, when you Google this word, you're not going to find it because it's not on the internet. But, and I forget who you said your source was. You can speak to that in a second.
Hmm.
But you said, but there is a class of angels that are called paraphims.
Yeah,
Can
absolutely.
you
Mhm.
expand
Yeah,
on that a little bit? Because
absolutely.
everybody
This
knows
is,
about seraphim, not everybody,
mhm,
but
yeah,
people who are
yeah.
into
Mhm.
angels know about cherubims and seraphims, but
Yeah.
not really many people, I don't think, have
No,
heard of seraphims. And you hadn't even heard of it until you were informed, right? So who
it,
informed you and what is a
yeah,
paraphim exactly?
yeah. When I was asking about who's in this realm, and I was asking Yeshua basically what are the categories, because there's three categories basically in the second chakra. So does that match as above, so below? So are there three categories? And I only know of two, like you're saying. I know of the cherubim and the seraphim, and so there is another one, and I use the pendulum basically as like, is there a name? And then I'm asking, essentially, um, what does it start with? And, can I get an actual? And that's what we did. So we just basically intuited into that. There was a time, I think it was 10 years ago or something, after we had done this, that name came across. I was watching, I believe it was Ancient Aliens at the time, but that may have been, right? It's just the context of they are able to access a lot of these ancient texts. And one of these ancient texts basically did mention it. So,
Hmm.
and I'm not actually sure which one at this point, but
Mhm.
but most of the traditions, Jewish tradition has a really good, connection with angelic entities, right? Islam has a real connection with, right, Gabriel, and so
Mm.
when I talk about Gabriel, I say Gabriel's written all the great books from the beginning of time. So essentially, if there is a great book, it's written by Gabriel, and
Yeah.
not great books. So right, so it is that coming through of the communicator. And so that's a realm that basically came from Yeshua. And then the entities that exist within that realm, these primary angelic entities. And like we mentioned before, every angel, just like us, has a positive and negative, has a light and a shadow. So we don't do a lot of work in that area either, like thinking that Raphael's shadow is death, is the angel of death. And so ultimate healing, often death. And so, so it's a hard concept, right? That's not what we prefer usually, but here's where we see that positive attribute, right? Positive, from both of these realms, that we can learn from both of these realms, and that if we're in a negative expression, then we're probably learning from the negative expression of that angelic entity, and if we're in a positive, then probably learning from the positive. And that can be, and again, we try and discern that, like, it's better to learn from positive. Well, not necessarily, right? I mean, I've had some pretty bad experiences that I identify in my own personal life that have led to greatness, and they have been brought by positive angelic entities.
I think helping remember that the toroidal field,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that gets rid of that like
Mhm.
polarity thing, right?
Yes,
Because,
it definitely does.
the light and the shadow there, it's just like the
Mhm.
yin yang, instead
Perfect.
of being like good and bad, it's like, no, you have a toroidal field, and in that is
Hmm.
your shadow energy and your light
Yes,
energy. Just like there's daytime and nighttime, right? It's not like
perfect.
nighttime gets here and we're all like scared and run inside because
Right.
they're like, oh, nighttime bad.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yes.
I do want to thank you so much for every single question that you've answered. This has been a
Yeah.
rich conversation.
Mm.
We do have a little bit more time, but
Yeah.
we haven't answered any questions from the audience. And
Yeah.
my childhood friend does have a question about angel numbers. And I believe it wasn't it Doreen Virtue who did uh
Yeah.
was she the initiator of angel numbers? I mean,
Yeah.
when I first found out about angel numbers, I was looking them up all the time. I'd see something on the clock
Yeah.
or a number on a page of a book or whatever, and I'd go
Mhm.
look it up. And actually, people can poo-poo it if they like, but even
Mhm.
before I knew about angel numbers, I had a strong and still do very strong connection to numbers. For instance, my
Mhm.
dad was a 3, my mom was a 6, I'm a 369, and
Mhm.
I always find, sacred geometry, numbers, it's like the language of the universe, it's the fabric of the universe, it's a blueprint of the
Absolutely.
universe, sacred geometry,
Yes.
right? And you can't talk about sacred
Mhm.
geometry without talking about numbers. So for me,
Absolutely.
they mean a lot, but they also mean a lot to Angie. And so I was
Yeah.
wondering, can you help answer her question about angel numbers? She says, what about angel numbers? Like when we look up numbers, she says there are angel numbers, question mark.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And so the sequence of two numbers, three numbers, right? This, when we mentioned my mom and her passing, basically she passed at 12:12. So she took her last breath at 12:12. Now, throughout my life since then, when I see 12:12, that's an angel number because it's 33. And so it's basically two threes. And so this is her saying, I have a message for you. And
Yeah.
so
And
yeah.
Angie's connection is 222. Do you know about
Excellent.
222?
Well, I would
She
put it
she
in,
sees
yeah.
222 all the time.
Hmm. So when in this way, we can also do this to confirm it, right? So we'll ask, right? So
There
we'll
you
ask
go,
as well,
Angie.
right? So,
Your
so the
bonus question.
yeah, so this would be right 6 in numerology. So 6, and I always just simplify 6 as connection to spirit, source, and so this is where we can ask: Is this 222 a 6? Yes. Okay, so that's what we want to look at. And are we going to put it in a chakra? No. And are we going to put it in a message? Yes. And so are you connecting through the synchronicities that we're talking about in a way that is a back and forth relationship communication? Not enough yet. And so that 222 is learn how to communicate back and forth with these metaphysical entities.
With
Yeah,
source, right?
that with yeah, with
And
so
these
basically,
metaphysical
yeah,
entities.
absolutely, yeah. So that's
And
basically that answer is we just want you to communicate more.
that's so awesome. And
Yeah.
she does have a number that's very prominent, and we've talked about this too, and it's
Mm,
8. Well, it's 134, but it adds up to 8. So she's got the
yeah.
6 and the 8, which is a 14, which is a 5. We've
Hmm.
discussed this, but so what about
Sure.
the 134?
Yeah. So do we break it down into 1, 3, 4? Do we add it up? Okay. So we definitely are putting it in the realm of an 8. So what is the abundance? So we'll just simplify that into abundance. And is it positive? Yes. And is it specific? Yes. And so, what is the abundance that's, I put it in context of source, metaphysical, physical. So, what's the abundance that's waiting for her just outside of the physical in this metaphysical realm, waiting to come in when she creates this relationship with source and has these conversations? So that fits together really well as far as, right, we got
Listening.
this abundance waiting for you, and we have heard your intentionality, and we want it to work back through your chakra system. And that's where we can look directly into chakras and say, in this case, right, can we ask that question, and do we have permission? Yes. Okay. second chakra. So now we're back into the twos, the second chakra development. So really working on what's going on in that second chakra, what relationships can be reorganized in a way that can open a path for this abundance to come through.
Wow, that's so rich. That's so rich. I can't wait to hear what she has to say after the live. Angie, did you like that? Are you still there? If you're not, you'll have to listen to the replay because he gave you some really rich information. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
My pleasure.
oh gosh, this is so fun. I don't want to stop. But so we
Yeah.
have about 1 minute left, and let me
Yeah.
see if I think we did a really good job of covering everything on my list. Yes. Um, so Kevin, I have a question for you.
Excellent.
Did you enjoy this?
Love. So
Yeah.
grateful. This is just an amazing opportunity. It
Okay,
really
good.
is.
Me too.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that she says Angie says wow and yes, yes, yes. So
Mm.
uh so now you've helped me get over my initial fear, and of course having
Yes.
a moderator in the background is so
Wow.
perfect.
So
Thank
grateful.
you,
Yes.
moderator. I know this moderator likes to be private, so I won't say their name. Hopefully I
Mm.
didn't already, but thank you, moderator. And so I'm going to continue to do this. I'm going to start
Yay.
by doing it twice a month and then hopefully once a week, and we'll take it from there. I guess my question is, would you be willing to come back someday? Because it seems like,
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, not it seems like, but you're just such a wealth
Yeah.
of information. You deliver information in a way that people can really work with it, where it's not just
Mhm.
some nebulous concept. It's like the metaphysical brought
Yes.
into the physical
Mhm.
in a tangible way where you can really
Yeah.
work with it. And it's just fun in the first place. So I
Yeah.
hope you can come back
I
sometime.
I will look forward to it. It's, this is the work that I do, right? So I mean, it
Yeah,
really is. It's the format that I'm used to,
yeah,
post COVID, and basically in this way of doing it online, having some questions come in, and being able to interact in this way. So really, really beautiful. And we're, Snow Wellness is working on different aspects of this as well. So maybe we can switch back and forth, and we can have
yeah.
you on, and we can do right. So I definitely see
Let's
a
do
future
it.
here for sure. Yes.
Collaboration. Um,
Yeah.
Well, as I always tell you when we meet, even not, on this platform, but when we have our own private meetings, just
Yeah.
I always express my gratitude at the end.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
I think about you pretty much every day, even when we're not communicating in this format. And I am so glad that we have the connection that we do. And I think the
Me too.
people watching today and the people watching in the future are going to get so much from this. And
Yes.
you have a special guest coming to your house today, your brother. Isn't that correct?
Yes, tomorrow morning, and it's really going to be wonderful to see him. He's coming from this beautiful place in Colorado. He's going
Oh,
to coming through New Mexico here, and so we get a chance to reconnect. And yeah, it's
mm.
just always a special time.
Awesome. I hope that you guys have a really special time. Maybe you'll do something together in honor of your mother. We didn't get to talk about her
Mm,
much today, but hopefully we can
yeah,
revisit that in the next time. And
absolutely. Yeah.
we have a guest that says, fascinating information, so much to unpack here. Great first, Julie. Kevin is
Mm.
awesome, she says. So,
Thank you so much.
well, thank you so much, Kevin. I'll just we'll probably need to go now because I'll just keep saying the same thing over and over. Thank you so
It's
much.
really
This
true.
is so fun. This
Yes,
is so great. It's all genuine, but I'm just
it is.
so
It is.
overjoyed that I think I really would just continue to say the same thing. So,
Well,
thank you so much.
much appreciation. Thank you all for tuning in,
Yeah.
and thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing Gabriel to come through and share his information, and Yeshua and the whole gang. And
Yeah.
as we do in this work, basically we have a light touch basically on this metaphysical world. And so it is, yes, it is important, and yes, creating relationships is the key. And so that's my message to all of you that are listening is work on creating relationships, not only in this physical world, but in this metaphysical world. So we can really feel as we have a back and forth. And that is just this really important. This is the interdependence that we mentioned earlier. So interdependence is me and those that I'm in relationship, like these rocks and crystals and things that I have on my desk, and source, God. And so basically the triumvirate, the three, always positive, negative, neutral. This is what we're doing here. We're here to build relationships, and this is my job, is to help you to do that. And
Mhm.
so I look forward to tuning in and having, some people tune into Snow Wellness. And, again, the website is snowwellness.com, and we have an email that we send out. So sign up for that.
Oh,
Last
yeah.
week we sent one out on integrity. One of my favorite words,
Me
integrity,
too. One of
integral,
my favorite words too.
right? Yeah. So check that out. And I will look forward to doing this more in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is the
Blessings
best
to all of you.
possible first live I could imagine.
Absolutely. It's so great. Thank you. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Bye, Kevin. Ciao, ciao. Thanks
All right.
again. Okay.
You bet.
Bye.